Okay, so the first cut on an otter that I always make is the same one we make on all our animals. It's going to be coming down here just in front of the vent. This one's a female. Uh, and down this way. I hope you guys can see that. That little white line that I just kind of drew in the fur there by pulling back, well, that's what I'll be cutting, is right here. So I'll make that cut and then I'll show you my next couple cuts. Picked up a little trick from Timmons Trapper recently. He does it on the tails for sure, but I tried it with a couple critters on the ankles as well. And just that first little nip in helps you get in under the fur better. And I'm kind of off my angle here, but you can see I'm just following that line that I drew there all the way up. A little stuck. There we go. Up to the ankle. And then the next two cuts that I'm going to make are a little bit above the tail, the vent, or the rear end. I'm just going to make a little slit there so that I can get in. Once I get in, there we go. And I'm going to come back out to my line below the vent. So there, that's, you can see it's pretty well joined up. I know the light's kind of shitty, but, and then I'll do the same thing to the other side of the vent. Straight line down, pull out. I might have to use my actual knife. Get started a little bit and just work my way down, keeping the tail centered. To about there, and a little bit more there. So now you can see I'm almost 2/3 of the way down. So then you basically just start skinning, pull it tight, cut the white. With otters, they have lots of fat, so you're just kind of mostly cutting the seam and the fat. I'm just going to cut enough to be able to get around the leg. I try and use my fingers and hands as much as I can, but with otter, because of all the fat, well, it's a little bit harder. And I try and get as close to the skin as possible when I'm doing around the tail area, just because there's lots of gristle there. So when it comes to flushing, well, it's a little thicker, a little harder to do. We'll go around the front here, and I'll just pull it tight and cut the white. That's basically it. I know it's a little hard to see, but this right here is basically where I'm cutting. Close to the skin, but, or to the hide, but not right on it. And just work down the belly a little bit here. Like I said, I don't like using my knife more than I have to, but to get it started, you need the knife. So just be careful. And take your time. off a bit more of this tail. Put my knife down, because I should be able to work my finger in there quite a ways, or my thumb. Pushing my thumb through until it pops through. There we go. Work the hide off just a little bit down the leg, and then right where my finger actually was, I'll slide the knife in, cut it off square. So then I need my knife here just a little bit, and I should be able to peel it. Yeah. Start peeling her down, and I'm going to switch the legs. And just something else I do, I always keep sawdust in the fur shed. And because your gloves, if you wear gloves or your hands can singe the fur, I take the sawdust and just rub it all over my hands, gloves, get some of that excess grease that's on your gloves wiped off. That helps protect against a little bit of singeing. Another thing you can do is, if you keep a dish of water in the shed, well, you can always wet your gloves, and then when you're working, well, at least then you're not putting too much dry material on the fur, possibly causing it to singe. Because singe just degrades your fur. So with otters, you want to be very careful on how much you handle them. People often ask if they can touch my fur pelts when I show them, and they're just dried, and I say yep, except the otter. Do not put your hands on one of my otters. Just working down the belly a little bit. This was a female, so she's got nipples, and she's actually still partially frozen, which isn't a bad thing. Come around the backside and just keep cutting. Like I say, I stay close to the pelt, but I try not to. I make sure I don't go through the pelt. I'll leave a little bit of fat on the hide just to make sure that you're not going through. And then I should be down far enough again. I can work my finger through like on all other critters. Peel that down and we'll cut it square. So that's the legs skinned out. And now we'll do around the back of the tail and the back of the body until I can start getting my fingers through the hide there. Again, you can see when I pull, there's this white seam. Well, that's what we're cutting. So pull tight cut the white. If you remember that, then you'll do all right with skinning. So again, I'll start on this side, pulling tight, cutting the white, and I can see through there now, so I'll cut through there, or put my fingers through to pull down, and then I'll just peel this tail back to where my seam ends. I gotta go a little more. There, now I should be able to get a tail stripper on this, and I'll pull it down apparently. Okay, so I got my little tail puller here. I'll put that on the tail, hold it nice and tight, and I'm just holding the tail puller and I'm pulling on the bone. Don't pull on the fur, just pull on the bone, on the tailbone, to get it out of your way out. And then I'll tuck the tail in. And I can even do one better and tuck it in up here. At least then it's not flopping in my face. Have a little bit more sawdust for my hands. And then it's just a matter of pulling the hide down. So you can see I got most of the hide off there in that pulp. There's the rest of it. You can see the shoulders right here. I am going to use my knife just a little bit to get me going here. So again, I'm pulling tight, and I'm just barely touching. I'm not touching the skin or the pelt. I'm just pulling tight and cutting the white. I'm putting constant pressure down as I do. Whew. She was still half frozen when I started, and the pelt's cold. What I'm going to do though, I'm just going to skin these guys out for tonight. I have another one to do after this one, and then I'll do the second part. I'll keep it on the same video, but the second part will be of fleshing, because I'm going to put them in the freezer. A couple of the guys that I talked to, and one of the guys who actually showed me the first otter I ever boarded, he helped me out with it, and he showed me how to do what they call frost fleshing or boarding. And that's basically how I'm going to end up doing these two. I will just flesh them out right away sometimes. It all depends on how much time I have. Now that I'm down far enough, I can get my hand in. And I'm only about an inch from the elbow, and that's where I'm going to ring it. I'm going to cut the whole paw off there, or the pelt there, slip the arm out, and I'll do the same. I'll just turn you down just a little bit. If you fall off the shelf, I apologize. And I'll show you with this one. So, working my finger through the rest of the way so I don't have to actually use my knife. The knife can cut the pelt. and then about an inch from the elbow, because you got to cut that off anyway, so you may as well just leave it on the Otter. You don't need an inch, 3 inches of arm on your board. So there's that. We'll raise them up just a little bit. And then we'll pull down to the ears, which are right there. When I get to this point, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just rub a bit of sawdust on the pelt or on the hide, and that just gives me extra traction as I'm pulling. I try not to go too close to where I'm going to be cutting though, because the sawdust will dull your knife. So now we're at the ears, or close to the ears. We got a little bit further to go. You want to watch, this guy's got nice big ones. When you get near these arteries, do not cut those or you'll end up with a buttload of blood everywhere. So be careful around the arteries. Just going to work down a little bit. Make sure I pull tight so that I can cut the white. That's the ear right there. I'm actually going just a little further on it, just to leave the cartilage on the carcass as much as possible anyways. Saves you having to cut through it after. So there's ear number 1 right there. There's ear number 2. I'll use my other knife for the bone or around the skull. But before I do, pull down to the eyes. Oh, pull any harder, I'm going to pull his head right off. So we'll just skin him. Keep going. Pull tight. Cut the white. I know I'm repeating that, but it's just, if you always remember that, then you're never gonna cut the seam. There's lip number 1. I'm actually doing this backwards because my camera's not on my head. There's the eye. Eye number 2. The rest of the lip. Should be able to pull down almost to the nose now. Not quite. I'm just going to put a bit of sawdust on the hide where that blood's dripping. That'll help soak up some of the mess and keep it from going too far. Okay, so we're back. Pull that chain up out of my way. So we'll just keep cutting down, pulling tight. Around the nose. I got my finger in. These are a couple of little things actually I didn't start doing till today, only because I just learned them this morning from Timmins Trapper, and thought I'd try them out. They seem to work pretty good. And there you go, that's the nose. Bottom lip you don't need, so just cut it off square. And there's your otter. So next up will be boarding, or fleshing, and then boarding. Fleshing takes a little bit of time, but I will show you how to do that as well. And yeah, that's about it. They aren't complicated. You just have to really be careful with the singeing and not playing too much with the fur, I'm going to turn this one inside out because I'm going to freeze them. Give her a little shake, and there's a nice otter pelt ready for the freezer until I'm ready to flush her out. So, okay. If there's any questions, just let me know. Hey guys, so as you can see, I hope I got the angle set right here for you. I've got an otter here. I'm just gonna flush it out. So first thing I do, I take my beaver skinning knife, and while pulling down with my left hand, I just start up here near the lip and kind of go slow at first till you see where the skin is. Then you can start peeling that all down. Just take your time. You want to start with your knife at first for the neck and head area, just because it's a little trickier to get to with the fleshing knife. Just want to get a bit more of this flesh around the ear. Hope I've got my angle right for you. I'm going to do the second otter with a little bit of the ear cartilage. My GoPro sitting on the chair. And just give you a view from there. Just keep working your way down. I go down to about the top of the arm. You don't have to go that low. Just this gives you a good start when you do get that low. One thing, this otter is actually still quite cold. He was taken out of the freezer last night and thawed during the day. Yes, during the night last night. Just clean up this little bit that's still here. Careful around the shoulder a little bit. Then I'll turn them so I can do around between the ears. Do this area here. I'm just going to resharpen my knife, so you can see I'm really putting lots of sawdust on my hand. That's just to keep the grease down. So like I said, this otter's still partially, like, not frozen, but still frosty. I know he looks soft, but the more I play with him, the softer he's going to get here. So he started off right out of the freezer. I thawed him out overnight, like I said, but she was still a little frosty this morning. So I'm just going to take my time, working down. You don't want to go too deep, don't want to cut the hide. You just want to kind of the same way Dave does his beavers on his knee, actually. Dave Vandermeer of Trapping World, just Keep working that hide down, or that fat. And then I'll scrape a bit of this with the necker just to get the rest of it off, because it's not quite clean yet. But I'll turn her for now. And we're going to do this lip and this cheek through the whiskers. Just a little bit around the ear there. I want to keep pulling down, like my left hand is still pulling down on that hide, keeping it tight. Just long, smooth strokes. I'll turn her one more time and finish off the lower lip here. Again, I'm no professional skinner. This is just how I do it. Somebody asked me to do a video on it, so I said I would. So now that I got it down to there, I can put my knife away, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now you can see I'm lathering this up with sawdust. There's two reasons for it. One, the sawdust really helps grab that excess fat and makes it a lot easier to scrape. And two, it just keeps the grease from ruining the hide at all. So I'll just work this down around the arms on this side here a little bit. And we'll pull it up. I'm going to do the back of the head a bit better too. Lace it up with sawdust. That'll keep the grease down, and I try to push the sawdust in underneath that rolled over fat here just a little bit. That really helps to get the fat to peel off for you. Then I'll pull her up. You can see I'm also putting sawdust on the whole body. Like I said, that's for the fat. Keep it from singeing the fur at all. Push that sawdust in. I'll start with this arm. Finish off the back side of it here. With otters, you can put quite a bit of pressure down when you're flushing. They got pretty thick hide. So you don't have to worry too much, but at the same time you still want to be careful. Hope you guys can see that all right. So still just pushing off that flesh. We'll just do around this arm a bit. Pushing that sawdust in underneath. Gives you good traction. You get that extra fat off. If there's a little left around the arms when you're done, well, that's okay. You can still cut it off with the knife after, when she's on the board. You can see I'm almost pulling that right off with my hand now. That's what happens when it's been frosted. When the fat is still cold. Pull her up a little higher. Also, you can see on my fleshy knife, there's the tapered side and then the flat side. Well, I'm pushing taper side towards me. And that I'm using the flat edge to push that hide off, or that fat off. Roll her over a bit. Sawdust her up. This one doesn't actually have a whole lot of fat on the tail, so I'll have to show you with the other one how you do a real fatty tail. But I got most of the fat off of her on her tail when I skinned it, I guess. Really rub that sawdust on there. You can see that just scraped up what was left of that little bit of fat here. That was still on her. It's still a little white, but that's not fat anymore. That's just hide. Down the back. This whole chunk I'll peel down to about here. Hope you guys can see that. I know I keep saying that, but that's because you're on my head and I don't know my angle yet. Just like that. I know a lot of people say fleshing on otter is a pain in the ass and it's really hard, but really, they aren't that bad, especially once you get the hang of it, once you learn a few techniques. You don't always have to freeze it. The sawdust actually helps more than you realize. So if it's not frozen and then thawed back out again, oh, nipple. Gotta watch out for those. This was the female. It's not the end of the world if you don't freeze it. There's the other nipple. Should be another set a little lower. Keep turning it as you go, doing the high points, getting it all level and even. That just makes it roll off a little better too. And at this point now I'm using the weight of the hide as well, or the fat. It helps push it down. that sawdust, keep that hair from getting singed. Don't be afraid to use the sawdust, it's cheap. And I mean, if my bucket runs out, which it didn't, but if it does, I just grab it back off the floor and put her back in there. This is pretty fine sawdust, so it absorbs real well. There's the other nipple on this female. They both are. There we go. You can see them getting down to the bottom of the hide now. I'll just cut this in half. That's the belly. And we'll turn them over. There's the tail, and we'll finish off this back end here. This is actually all fat and a little bit of flesh, but just working that back down until it peels off. Now I'm into the tail. So with the tail, like I said before, she was actually skinned out pretty good. I guess I did a really good job when I did her, because there's not a lot of fat on this tail, but the other one hopefully will have a bit more for you. So same thing, except for the tail. I really go nuts with the sawdust. It just really helps get that fat absorbed. And scraped off there for you. Just going to use my knife for this last little bit here. Rehash that tail in sawdust. Go through it once with the sawdust, and then the scraper, and then lace her again with more sawdust and give her another good scraping. Like I said, this sawdust really, for me, the sawdust helps big time. Makes the job so much easier. And there you go. Give her a good little shake off. Next up, boarding. So I'll grab an otter board and do that. Boarding an otter. I've got it on an otter board here, and we're gonna start with the base of the tail right here. Pull down tight. Stick a pin in. Better move her over just a little bit. Pull it down snug. You don't want to pull down too tight to overstretch your fur. Pull this side out a bit. This side's got to come out. So then
pull down these legs a little bit in this area. With otters, you really got to push your needle pins in deep. Make sure that they hold, because as he stretches, he'll practically pull himself apart. Pull this side down a bit more. And otters take quite a few pins to do. And then pull this side over, especially in the tail. So now that the bottom end's done, I'm not quite to the bottom line. That's just because I couldn't get them any further and I'm not overstretching them. So then we'll pull out here, put a pin in there. Put another one on this side. We'll keep working our way down the tail here. So I'll turn you off for a second and keep going. So you can see I put in quite a few pins. They're all close together. The reason for that is the closer together they are, the less you get a wavy tail. All these areas, if your pins are too far apart, where the pins aren't, will shrink in, and you end up with a funny looking tail. Looks like it's a wave almost. So there's the tail, and then we'll turn her over and pull down the belly side a little bit. Put a couple pins in. Not going to put a whole lot just yet because I got to cut the viewing window. So on a male otter, when I cut the viewing window, normally I'd go to about the penile hole. On her, she's got the 4 nipples, and I'm actually going to go about that high to cut that view window for the fur for when she's dried and taken off the board. So I'll grab my kniff. I'll pull down a little bit. Just keep pulling snug. Cut that viewing window out. Come over on this side. Cut down to my pins, keep pulling snug. And then I'm just going to pin off the sides of this a little bit to help hold it in place while it finishes drying. You can see here how I didn't put a pin here, so it's shrunken in. Well, that's how your tail will look if you don't put enough pins in. So that's why you want to put lots of pins in the tail. I'm just putting in a few extra here just to make it look nice and straight. Do this other side. Okay, so that's done. I'm just gonna clean up around here a little bit around the arms before I grab a belly board, and I'll show you what I do with the arms as well. Put a belly board in her. Still just a little bit here. These scissors work great. They're actually meat scissors. You can just clean up some areas if you got a little bit of fat left over. So now what I'll do is I'll take my arms, I won't pull on the outside, like on this side of the leg, I won't pull on it. I'm going to pull the inside over. And the reason for that is they want the back fur, and when your hide shrinks, it'll shrink that way. So if you pull your leg in too far, well, then you're not going to have, your fur is going to stretch too tight on the outside. So if you pull the belly towards the outside, pin it down really good, pull the inside of the leg to the outside. You can also sew the leg holes. I used to, and then realized that it doesn't really change a whole lot. There's the 3 pins for that side. Fix that one. Again, I'm pulling the inside fur over the outside of the leg hole. And that's, like I said, when your fur stretches and dries, it'll shrink towards the back more and better this way. And there you go. That's boarding an otter and fleshing. Any questions, feel free to ask. Like I said, it takes lots of pins for the tail. Make sure she's nice and snug, and that's all there is to it. It's not as complicated or as hard as people seem to say it is. This is my fourth one this year. I've got one more to do. So I'll have put up 5 just this year, and I mean, that took me, what, half an hour, maybe an hour to completely flesh and board. So, alrighty, any questions, like I said, feel free to ask. Like and comment, whatever you want.